When I finally left the hospital in July of 2022, I thought the worst was behind me. I had just survived the scariest experience of my life. I'd been in the hospital for 2 weeks, part of the time in the ICU. Doctors told me I had cirrhosis. My body had basically shut down. But when I got discharged, I had hope. The plan was simple: stop drinking, let my liver recover, follow every instruction from the doctors. And maybe, just maybe, I could avoid a transplant. Because to me, a transplant was the scariest thing imaginable. Um, so when I got home, I started rebuilding my life one step at a time. The first challenge was learning to walk again. I had a walker when I got home. That sucked. Um, After being that sick and lying in a hospital bed for weeks, your body just becomes so incredibly weak. I remember walking slowly around the house, then slowly around the block, and every day I tried to get a little faster, go a little further. Um, and my hepatologist laid out a clear plan for me. He was a genius, actually. Mediterranean diet, low sodium, strict sobriety, a few new medications. I had to get frequent blood tests to prove that I was not drinking. And I also needed a endoscopy or an EGD to check for esophageal varices, which are veins that can grow in your neck because your main vein and your portal vein gets backed up, so it creates more pressure, and your blood creates more pathways, so you can get these veins that can burst in your neck and you can bleed out and die. Um, and I followed everything he told me to do um, perfectly. I was afraid of dying. Um, and I was even more terrified of needing a transplant. So I became extremely disciplined. Uh, like I said, one of the requirements was to prove sobriety. So I had PEF tests at first, I think every week, and then they were every other week. A PEF test can detect if you've had alcohol uh, weeks after you've consumed it. And I don't think you need much. Like, I think if you drink a beer, 2 weeks later, they can tell if you did. I also was told I need to go into either AA or have addiction medicine counseling. My insurance paid for one on one counseling, so I did that. I did it all. Not because I was forced to, but because I wanted to live. And for the first couple of months, things really started improving. Um, my lab numbers were getting better. I was getting stronger. And by October 2022, I was walking a lot. Um, I started feeling like maybe my liver was recovering and maybe I'd caught it just in time. Um, Maybe I was just going to beat this, but cirrhosis is a strange disease. Sometimes it gives you a little bit of hope before it takes it away. Um, Around that time, I started noticing more swelling in my legs and ankles and some fluid retention. So I let my hepatologist know, and he prescribed me some diuretics. And at first, they worked really well. The swelling went down, uh, and I felt better again. And then something else happened. In early November, I caught what seemed like a chest cold, but it was pretty bad. I had a nasty cough. It's probably RSV. I have little kids. Um, but I felt so run down and out of breath. And I remember my doctor listened on his stethoscope and said, "Oh, that sounds kind of weird. I'm going to send you for a chest x ray." And then the chest x ray revealed that I had a large pleural effusion. Um, so fluid started building up in my pleura, sac that's in between m- my lungs and my body cavity, and fluid builds in and starts collapsing your lung. So they increased my diuretics, and that helped for a little while. But that was also when they stopped another medication I had, which was a beta blocker, carvedilol, uh, because my liver was too sick to take it. And then eventually another problem started occurring, and that was my sodium level started dropping. And diuretics can do that. Liver disease definitely does that. And in fact, low sodium is a sign that your liver disease is really starting to progress. Um, so they had to take me off of diuretics to preserve my sodium. Uh, and they put me on a fluid restriction. I could only drink 1,500 uh, uh, milliliters of water a day, 1.5 liters. And that was one of the most miserable parts of the entire illness. I was always thirsty. And when you're sick like that, you just, you're always thirsty anyway. And so suddenly you're being told you can't drink much water. You had to count for fluid, like if you had a cup of coffee. It was horrible. But worse than that were the pleural effusions. And once I stopped the diuretics, the fluid around my lungs kept coming back over and over. I started needing a procedure called a thoracentesis. It's a nightmare procedure. And what they do is you kind of lean over a table on a pillow, and they have a long needle, and it looks like it's about this long, and it looks like a knitting needle. It's really thick. And they go in through your back between your ribs, and they have to stick it all the way into your pleural sac in your lung to guide a catheter in there. They numb it with lidocaine, which burns really bad, especially when it's in the middle of your body cavity. Um, and then they guide the catheter in, and then they suck the fluid out. And each time I had a thoracentesis, they took out 2.5 liters of fluid from my right lung, and there was still fluid left over. That's how large my pleural effusions were. And I had to get that done twice a week, and it was very painful. It was exhausting. Um, and it was just wearing my body down. And so I went from feeling optimistic to feeling like the trapdoor had just opened beneath my feet. My health started declining quite quickly. I was getting weaker, more frail, more exhausted. And what I didn't know at the time was my hepatologist had already started seeing where this was going. About 3 weeks before things really started falling apart, he called me, and he said something that stuck with me. He said, "I want you to go through an expedited liver transplant evaluation, just in case." At the time, I thought I thought it was just a precaution. And looking back now, I think he already knew. Uh, he knew I was going to need a liver transplant, but he also knew how terrified I was of the idea. So he kind of softened it, said just in case. And the transplant evaluation process was intense. A huge number of medical tests, scans, consultations, psychological evaluation. And while I was still dealing with constant pleural effusions and procedures twice a week, it was physically and emotionally exhausting. And then one day in February, my hepatologist called my pulmonologist while I was in the office to get another procedure. And they both talked to me, and they told me the truth, that I was going to be listed for a liver transplant. And I was going to need one. And that was the moment everything became really real. And I broke down crying, and I had to learn to accept it. So uh, in the next video, I'll tell my story of my liver transplant evaluations and where I went from there. So be sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching. Take care.